This is a total guide to mountain bike wheels to help you understand what is on your bike, how to identify what you need if anything needs replacing, and the key features that need to be considered if you're in the market for a new pair of wheels. Now, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button as well. Now, essentially, mountain biking came from a bunch of rebels converting their clunker bikes to go off-road. And they happen to be 26-inch wheels. So that's kind of where we started. But in the last decade, we've seen 27.5, which is also known as 650B, and also 29er. Now, all of these measurements simply refer to the width or the diameter of the wheel. Now, in XC, we see a lot of 29ers, sometimes 27.5 on smaller sizes. Trail and Enduro have embraced both 27.5 and 29, and sometimes have mixed wheels. Downhill have embraced both 29 and mixed wheels. 26 kind of lives on still, but usually dirt jump and pump track bikes. So to identify what size you have, often it's written on the rim itself, or even on the tire itself. Or you can get a measuring tape and just measure the widest part of your wheel to work out what size you need. It's very rare that a frame can take both wheel sizes, so you have to check your manufacturer's spec to see what wheel size you need in your existing frame, or if you're buying a new frame. Sometimes you can convert a 29er down to a 27.5, but you might need a new linkage or even a new rear end, so do check that first. So your two most common materials for rims is aluminium and carbon, and they each have their own merits. Carbon can be stiffer, it's more responsive, less likely to go out of true. It can be lighter for the same strength rating as aluminium. And the stiffness means you get good energy transfer when you're pedaling hard, and they don't flex in the corner as much typically. Hence, they're a great option for XC wheels and anyone who's racing anything. Carbon is comparatively more expensive though, and if a significant impact happens, it could cause the rim to crack, whereas aluminium will dent, which can potentially mean the end of your ride. However, carbon is actually repairable, whereas aluminium isn't, and a lot of carbon manufacturers are offering lifetime replacement at the moment. So alloy or aluminium is often more affordable than carbon, and it can be more comfortable because they're generally not stiff. And if you dent a rim, you can often bend it back, but they can't be permanently repairable if they really break. But hence, this is why trail and enduro riders do tend to favor aluminium, because if the worst happens, more likely to be able to finish your ride. Rim width will be another consideration for your new set of wheels. This measures the internal distance between the insides of the rim walls. You don't usually worry about the external width unless you're concerned with aerodynamics in, say, a gravel bike set of wheels. But wider rims allow better support for tires, because if they are too narrow, then the tire can have some side-to-side movement. It can even roll off the rim if you ride it too hard. However, if they're too wide, you can get a flat profile on your tire and the tread won't work so well either. So as a guide, cross country usually uses 20 to 30 millimeters wide, which is good for 2.1 to 2.3 inch tires. Trail usually goes for 30 millimeters, which is good for 2.3 to 2.5 inch tires. And Enduro usually uses 30 to 35 millimeters, which is good for 2.4 to 2.6. And it'll even fit 2.8, which is your plus size tires. If you're in any doubt of what rim width you need, the manufacturers should state what tire size is best for their wheel. So typically choose a rim that is best for the tire that you prefer to run. If you want to run tubeless or sealant instead of inner tubes, then you need a rim that states it's tubeless compatible. But technically, as soon as you add any kind of tubeless tape, the rim should be compatible with tubeless sealant. This isn't to be confused with tubular or tubs, which is a specific type of rim where you would need to glue the tyres on. Something a bit more commonplace in road or cyclocross and sometimes some Elite XC wheels. What's more important to note on rims is that some have hooks and some have hookless beads. So this spank cross section here shows that we have hooks on the beads. And they've also got some added patterns in here to grip onto tubeless tyres as well, which is pretty handy. But most wheel brands will tell you that only a particular tyre model will fit their rims, and vice versa. Some tyre companies say that their tyres only fit with either hookless or hooked. So if you have a particular favourite tyre, then you might want to check what they state in terms of rim spec and then consider buying that particular rim so you can run your favourite tyre. So to make sure your wheel set fits your bike, you'll need to consider the hubs. And you'll need to consider what size those hubs are, what brakes you want to run, even what cassette you want to use in the future. So, axle and hub sizing. Now, the front hub will be determined by your fork. So the width of it will be determined by the specs of your fork. And the rear is determined by the specs of your frame because of the rear triangle. On the rear, quick release is usually 135 millimeters in length. Bolt-through axles are 142, with boost being 148 and Super Boost Plus being 157. So Boost and Super Boost Plus just means that the spokes are more spread out and should give more stiffness and more strength to your set of wheels. So these are usually reserved for enduro bikes or burly trail bikes or downhill bikes. On the front, most axles are 110 millimeters in length these days, and the most common diameter of axle is usually 15 millimeters. You can still get 20 millimeters on some downhill forks and some burly enduro forks. So check out the specs of your forks. As some enduro forks like Fox 38s, they look like they're 20 millimeters, especially with the Cobalt X, but they're actually still 15 millimeters. Another thing to remember when you're buying new hubs or wheels is don't forget to choose the discs specific to what you want to run. So there's two types. There is center lock and there is also the 6-bolt here. So it's personal preference which one you want to run, but if you don't plan on changing your discs, then just match what you are already running already. You can obviously convert to center lock if you're running 6-bolt and you buy a new set of wheels, but do consider that you might need some new tools to make sure that they fix onto place, because they can't be fixed with a multi-tool like the 6-bolt can. So finally, you need to consider what free hub body you need when you're buying a new set of wheels or a new hub. And that's basically what your cassette sits on. So SRAM have XD drive, Shimano has either Hyperglide or Microspline. So you can only run XD cassettes on XD bodies and only Microspline cassettes on Microspline bodies, for example. But it's important to note that Shimano cassettes work with SRAM derailleurs and vice versa. SRAM cassettes will work with Shimano derailleurs, but you just need to be careful of your gear sizing limits. So do check what gear ratios your derailleur can take, then decide what cassette you want to run if you're changing anything, and then basically choose the free hub body that suits the gear ratios or the cassettes that you want to buy in the future, because your cassettes you're going to be replacing more often than your wheels, so it makes sense to start with a free hub body that matches the cassette that you want to be buying on a regular basis. So bonus tip for you here is to consider free hub engagement. Now, this is basically how quickly your hub engages when you start to pedal. So faster engagement is obviously faster, and this is great for anyone who's racing or just wants immediate feedback. But faster can also give you too much feedback, especially if your frame or your bike is prone to pedal kickback, say like on a single pivot design, you might not want a faster engaging hub. Also, a slower engaging hub might be just fine, but it's also probably more affordable. The faster engaging hubs do tend to be on the expensive side. Now, most hubs have pulls, like this 6-pull design, which are basically arms that splay out to engage on the inside of the hub. And the other system is ratchet design, like this DT Swiss one. And we can go down a bit of a rabbit hole here with which is best. And there's also some unusual ones like Doddy's Super Hub i9 here, which basically engages different pulls at different times. But I think what the takeaway here is basically start to look at your budget and then work out what's best for you. Do check out Doddy's video on the Super Hub versus affordable hub as well. If you're buying parts to build up your own set of wheels, or you're advising a bike shop of what you want them to build for you, then you're going to need to consider spokes, nipples, and lacing patterns that you want. Of course, how easy a spoke is to replace or fix might be a concern to you anyway when you're buying a ready-built wheel, so do pay attention. So the spokes that you need will be determined by the way that they attach to your rim and your hub. Okay, J-bends are the most traditional shape, as they're shaped like a letter J. Some people say that they are weaker, especially around the bend, and they can be harder to replace because of the way you thread it through the hub. But they are so much more standardized in terms of sizing that you are much more likely to find replacements like this online, and even bike shops will stock it. So straight pull is said to be easier to replace because you just drop them in, and they're said to be stronger as well, especially if you consider the spokes that are on Doddy's i9 Dream Build wheels. But the problem with those sorts of spokes is that they are very specific to the hub and the rim that you've purchased or your wheel set. You're very unlikely to find spares in a bike shop, and you might have to consider buying a bunch of them for your wheels as spares and keeping them on you at all times in case you need them. So bladed spokes are more of a thing on the road for aero purposes. You can get them on some XC wheels or gravel wheels. I'd say they aren't necessarily any stiffer or better, just different. So just a word on spoke lacing patterns. You get something called 2-cross, which means a spoke crosses 2 other spokes, and you get 3-cross, which is said to be stronger because you cross over 2 spokes and then go underneath before crossing over a third. By contradiction, radial spokes is where they don't cross at all. They are just straight, basically. And we used to have those on rim brakes, but now we see them a little less at the moment because we have disc brakes, so the braking forces are transferred to the rim via the spokes. So having this crossing pattern means that they're much stronger and resistant to those braking forces. Personally, I think spoke count is more important than your lacing pattern, or if not just as important. 28 or less, like this one, which is 24, can be really lightweight, but if you break one, that means that a bigger percentage of the surface area is unstructurally sound, basically. Unlike this one is actually carbon, so if you broke a spoke, it might be less likely to go out of true, but if you had an aluminium with fewer spokes, then obviously that's less surface area that's being kept straight, so it can go out of true really quickly. That's why you tend to find with trail wheels like this one, particularly in aluminium, that you have a higher spoke count, something more than 28. This one's a 32. That means that if you should break a spoke, then there's still a lot more spokes keeping that rim in true. So just a little bit of finer detail here might be to consider spoke nipples when you're buying a new set of wheels. You can have some that are present on the outsides like this one, which means that you can adjust the spoke tension if you need to quite easily, even with the wheel on the bike. But if you have any nipples that are hidden, like for example, a set of Envy wheels, if you ever need to adjust those, then you'd need to take the tire off and the tape in order to adjust them. And you even need a special tool to adjust those. However, I will say that Envy are carbon, and technically, once they're hand built, you shouldn't need to adjust them afterwards anyway. But another thing to consider is maybe nipple material. So you can get aluminium or you can get brass. Now, people like aluminium because they're lighter, but we're talking 10 grams on 30 nipples instead of 30 grams, for example, with a set of brass nipples. But the benefit of brass nipples is that they are less corrosive, which means they're less likely to seize in a rim, whereas aluminium can seize. Another minor benefit of aluminium nipples, if you care, is that you can get them in colors as well, which you can't with brass. They tend to be just, well, brass colored or black. So if you're getting a custom set of wheels built by someone, you should be able to talk through your needs with them and make sure things like spoke hole count matches the hubs and the spokes that you want are in there, and generally it fits your frame and fork. But in summary, if you're looking to buy a full set of ready-built wheels online, you need to make sure that you're choosing the right wheel size, obviously, that fits your bike, but also the hubs fit your frame and forks as well, and the axles that you have. And make sure to take note of whether it's boost or super boost as well, because that does matter. And that should narrow things down a lot for you. And the finer choices will come in your rim widths, making sure that they are good for the tires that you want to run, and that your frame and forks can physically take that. And then choose the material that is best for you or your budget. And everything else is just personal preference, like for example, hub engagement. But over time, you'll develop a bit of an understanding of what you like, and you'll be more confident buying a set of wheels. But hopefully this guide has helped you narrow down your options a bit more, and you're more confident in buying what you need for your bike. So if you've enjoyed this video, then don't forget to give us a thumbs up and maybe let us know down in the comments below what you're considering buying in the near future. For now, thanks for watching.